Hello, this is Cho of the Shiny Colors Discord. Today we're going to be doing something kind of simple. It's going to be a little long, so we're going to be in it for the haul here, but I'll make sure to have some timestamps for things. We're currently on the wiki because I wanted to go over something that was kind of requested a little while back, but tech issues pushed this back until now. Every anniversary, you can technically purchase a selectable ticket that features limited SSRs up to a certain point. The third anniversary limited SSR ticket is going to be expiring in a couple days, so I wanted to go over all of the options for the produce and support side of things, just in case A, you haven't done the selection ticket yet, which I'd be surprised if you're still hanging on to it, or B, if we get selection tickets in the future, we have a basis for all of the older cards as well as some of the more recent ones. Now, for this video, we'll be going up to the second anniversary, so Asahi 2, and we'll be covering both sides of things. I'm going to try to keep it brief, so that way this is not like some hour-plus video, because there's a lot of cards to cover. So, let's go ahead and get things started. First off, we have Meguru 2. Meguru 2 is an all-rounder style unit that appeals using all three stats. She has really low damage, really bad passives, and an even worse memory appeal. Would not recommend ticketing Meguru. Next, Juri. Juri 2 is okay. The real merit of Juri 2 is the fact that she is an AoE vocal unit that has a team that is currently in the meta, even if she herself is not the big defining part of it. She's not the worst, her passives are okay, but otherwise, you don't have to ticket her necessarily. You can if you want, but not super high priority. Kogane 2. One of the weirder limited SSRs, honestly, considering the fact that she actually has one appeal that's dance and the other that's visual. Usually most limited cards focus on one stat, so that already is kind of a problem. She's mostly a revenge unit, but the big thing about it is that her values are fine, her passives are not, and most of the teams that would want to use her have a better Kogane as an option, so not super recommended unless you just really like the costume design. Mono 2. Mono 2 is okay. She has like kind of okay-ish passives. She's a little better than Meguru 2 because she's built around the same concept, just I think little better numbers overall. She's the best of the three for the limited Illumination stars of this era, but that's not really saying a whole lot. Wouldn't really recommend it, especially if you have any modern mono SSR. Sakuya 2. We've had a chance to talk about Sakuya 2 on the channel. I think she's okay. Visual Antika really hasn't gotten a lot of support as of lately, so I wouldn't really call her a high priority pick, just because everything that Visual Antika does, most teams do better right now. If we see more support for Visual Antika in the future, like directly, as opposed to the weird like dance visual combination they've been doing, then Sakuya 2 is an okay pickup, but not super high priority. Though the design is real nice. It's one of my favorite Sakuya looks. Hiyori 3, the first anniversary SSR. Aside from the fact her animation is really cool, this card has aged like milk. I honestly think that she might be worse than Meguru 2, which, for her being the first limited SSR, and Hiyori having 8 months to figure out how to make that better and really didn't succeed in doing so, is not a great sign. Would not really recommend this Hiyori outside of the whole aesthetic of the card. Tenka 2. This is the first, maybe, recommendation. Tenka 2 is an AoE unit that focuses on dance and healing, which is actually something Alstroemeria likes a lot. I would say that Dance Alstroemeria is their second best unit in terms of attribute, with visual being the first. Tenka 2 is not as important for Dance Alstroemeria as she used to be, but she's still a really solid card to pick up overall. If you have a Mono 3 by some happenstance, Tenka 2 is a perfect pickup and would be recommended. If you're not really interested in that playstyle, then don't worry about Tenka, but the card art is cool, and it is a different side of Tenka that we don't see too often. Natsuha 3, the first June Bride. Natsuha 3 is Juri 2, but visual, and kind of a little bit worse. Really, the biggest problem is that Visual Hokura has not received basically any support, really, outside of Rinzai 5 in the last year. So as a result, Visual Hokura has just fallen to the wayside and isn't very good, and Natsuha 3 would not change that even if you had all the necessary pieces. So, wouldn't really recommend. The design is nice, card art is cool, and the concept of it is fine, but again, like Juri 2, damage values are low, passives are, passable. The memory appeal is not that great nowadays. Mamimi 3. The advantages of Mamimi 3 is the fact that she has one of the best stories for Mamimi. If you are a Mamimi P, this is the card you want to keep an eye out for. Otherwise, this card, mechanically, is not great. She was the first excellent SSR to be introduced to the game before Natsuha 5, but suffers all the same problems. The damage is really low, the gimmick itself is not super great because building Rainbow Stat is not easy, nor is it very lucrative compared to single stat. And her passives are very bad. So, would not recommend ticketing for Mamimi for mechanical purposes, but in terms of story, and you want to have that story on hand, card's great. Chiyuki 3. Chiyuki 3 is a weird spot. She's not a bad card because her passives are good, her appeals are strong, and her memory appeal is okay. The problem with Chiyuki 3 is that Alstroemeria, specifically Vocal Alstroemeria, has gotten almost no support since this card came out. So they're a 2019 team playing in 2021, which is not a great sign. The card itself is cool, the story is nice, but otherwise I wouldn't really recommend ticketing for Chiyuki 3. Yuika 3. This is probably the easiest recommendation I can make. Yuika 3, depending on the fest, is one of the best cards in the game, if not the best. She is an AoE dance unit that scales based on how low your health is, which is fantastic. Has a lot of great support, really great amount of synergy with a ton of really good support cards, and is real easy to work with in general. You almost don't even have to really build a team around her. You can just pick whoever you want and just have Yuika be the damage dealer, and if you know how to build it, she is easily some of the highest damage you can get in Shiny. So, very easy recommendation, plus the fact that Yuika 3 is probably one of her most important stories. So, from a lore perspective and a mechanical perspective, this card is top-notch. Easy recommendation. Now we get into cards that we had for the Shiny review, starting with Chiyoko 3. Single target dance unit, focuses on attention scaling. Is not that bad, honestly. Dance Hokura is not that far away from being relevant again, they just need something. They need some sort of support to push them back up into relevancy, because Vocal has just taken over completely. She's a good card and kind of necessary for Dance Hokura, so if you wanted to go that route in the future, she's a good card to pick up, otherwise I wouldn't worry about it. Amana 3. Similar deal to Tenka 2. Healing, dance, but single target. If you have Tenka 2, Amana 3 is a great pickup. As Dance Alstroemeria, I think, again, is like maybe a support or two away from being really good. But it is what it is. Visual Alstroemeria is just the better team to play right now. So if you want it, go for it. If not, don't worry about it. Mono 4. I still think Mono 4 is actually really solid. It's just that she's been power crept by Mono 6. Dual stat, focusing on Vocal and Dance. Good passives, good damage, good memory appeal. Pretty easy recommendation if you don't have a single Mono SSR, unless you really want Mono 6. Mamimi 4. Much like what we said for Choco 3, Mamimi 4 is the pillar for Visual Antika. If that is a team you want to build, then Mamimi is kind of necessary, but Visual Antika, like we mentioned with Sakuya, not really supported all that well, so the team is going to feel pretty lackluster for the most part. The design is really cool, and it is a nice story for Mamimi, though not as important as Mamimi 3, I feel, but it's still a good story nonetheless. You know, I'm not trying to sit here and saying that some of the stories are bad, but it all depends on what your perspective is of like character growth and whatnot versus just a day in the life kind of scenarios. Rinzai 4. Personally, I think Rinzai 4 is still one of the best support cards in the game. Has the ability to buff up all stats pretty evenly to high values, vocal appealer, good passives. Really nothing to dislike about her other than the fact that her appeal buffs last a pretty short amount of time. So you kind of have to end your appeal string with her in order for your memory appeal to be real strong. Pretty good recommendation overall, I would say. Kiriko 4. This is a weird one because I would say yes but no as to should you ticket this card. She is a vocal AoE unit that reduces judges' interest, aka how much damage they take, but she ignores interest so that her damage is always at its peak. By herself, this card is kind of whatever, and sort of struggles to let the rest of her team do things. However, with Sakuya 4, as well as the Kogane support, this elevates Kiriko to new heights, and what made Vocal Antika one of the most relevant teams for a long time. So, If you have those pieces or are interested in that, Kiriko 4 is probably the most important part of that team. So if you want to start Vocal Antica, get Kiriko whenever you can. Jury 4. Jury 4 is Choco 3, except visual. Kind of the same deal, and again, because visual Hokura has not gotten support, visual's kind of just thrown under the table for now. Really important card for visual Hokura, but it's not going to really service you all that well right now. So grab it if you want. The card art is fantastic for Jury, though. Kaho 4. Kaho 4 is a good card, kind of like Mono 4, just power crept by the card after her. Kaho 5 is just that good. She's a dance unit that buffs your memory gauge and buffs your attention, has good damage, good passives, good memory appeal. It's just kinda hard to build the memory appeal to do a high amount of damage because it scales on all 3 stats. I would get this Kaho if you do not have any other Kaho, as most of the permanent Kahos are kinda okay at best. Kaho 4 is the first like real Shining Star card for her. You know, ignore the shining eyes, you know. It's a good card, and a nice story too. Not super relevant, necessarily, but, you know, it is what it is. Again, I think the card is good. It's worth ticketing if you don't have any other Kaho, but Kaho 5, if you have her, kind of supersedes. Amana 4. Probably one of the most important pieces for Visual Alstroemeria. If that's a team you want to run, which it is their most relevant team right now, Amana 4, perfect pickup. Basically does everything you would want out of, say, Amana 3, except now it's visual, which has more support and better cards associated with it. So, good card for our selection. And then lastly for this video, Asahi 2. AoE visual unit that scales based on the type of buffs you have and can remove. By herself, she's actually not half bad. The scaling isn't super important for her, the AoE is what matters. Really, her biggest weakness nowadays is that her passives are a little on the weaker end. They're kind of not difficult to use, but they just don't work as well as some of the easier to use limited SSRs of the current time. If you want to play visual Straylight, she's a great card for it and kind of necessary, and just a good visual support in general. Now we're going to move things over to the support side of things. Starting our limited support SSRs is An no Carol Chiyuki, otherwise known as the worst support SSR in the game of the limited batch. A dance support for Alstroemeria that plays like Antica. This card is not very good. There's no real merit to using her because her masteries are bad, her passives are worse, and her appeals are really bad. So not recommended for the ticket. Tenka. Tenka's first limited SSR support is not the worst thing in the world. It just doesn't really match up nowadays, like if we look at it from here. Tenka is a vocal support with a gold passive that's not particularly strong. Kinda wish it was a little better, but it is what it is. The masteries are not super strong. Yeah. Train Station Mono. Train Station Mono's big advantage is the fact that she was the first unit mastery support added to the game. She has a lot of really good passives for dance and visual, and some pretty meaningful masteries for runes. As a result, I would say that she's probably one of the safest picks for a selection ticket if you just have no idea who to pick, because it's real easy to build around her and to build a halfway decent unit using just her, really. Flower Stand Meguru. Kind of a similar deal to Mono, but with slightly different masteries that focuses on audition mastery specifically, as well as some radio room work. The big thing with Meguru is that she was the first support to have unit mastery mental, which has now been replaced by the Grade Fest Fuyuko. So for a long time, Meguru was a great card for audition spamming and wing, because you could just build up mental way faster, as well as build up your main stats anyway with other audition masteries, thus cutting down how much you had to not audition for, say, 2.3 million fan runs. Not bad, not really meta relevant right now, she's okay, kind of a mixed bag for recommendation. Sick Day Kaho. A vocal support that focuses on mental mastery for some reason. I guess because they figured that Hokura teams have fairly low health and kind of explode when they're going correctly. But otherwise, the card's actually kind of okay still. Her passives are not bad, and her stat uncaps are okay as well. Not the worst card to pick up, but really only matters if you're playing a vocal team specifically. Kiriko. Kiriko's big thing is that she's a visual support that focuses on attention down. She was one of the first supports to really support this playstyle. Again, visual Antika, not really in the greatest of spots right now. Strictly okay, not high recommendation for picking on a ticket. Sleepover Baby Juri. One of the better dance supports for Hokura, and kind of just a decent generic dance support. She's a strong support with good passives, good masteries, and a lot of SP generation. As a result, you can build pretty strong cards using Sleepover Baby as a basis, especially with more copies you get of her. Pretty recommended, especially for Hokura teams, since Dance Hokura, again, not too terrible. But if you're not running a dance team, not as important. Mamimi. Mamimi's first limited support is actually really good. A 100% dance passive is nothing to sneeze at, especially because it lowers attention. This is one of the key supports for that Not Equal, aka Yuika 3 team. One of the best supports for that team by far. If you are trying to build a team around Yuika 3, this Mamimi is absolutely perfect for it, especially if you can get her to 2 stars. Yuika. Yuika's Halloween support is kind of weird. It's a card that focuses on poisoning yourself and then getting buffs for being poisoned. It's okay, but the gimmick is all over the place and really only supports one particular playstyle, which is not popular and not really used that much. You sometimes see her float around in Gradefest, but not really a big priority. Hiyori. Onsen Hiyori is another Audition Mastery limited SSR, kind of like Flower Stand Meguru, except focuses on SP. It's only a little bit stronger in the SP department than the SR permanent Hiyori, so this is not a huge upgrade for players that want to use that Hiyori specifically for wing farming. So otherwise, the passives are okay, much like Meguru and Hiyori, they're the same values. Vocal and dance is kind of an mix nowadays. Vocal is good, but again, the passives are not really important in the meta right now. This is just a card that's good for wing, and that's about it. Chiyuki. Chiyuki's second limited SSR support was kind of an addendum to her first. Being an actual dance support for Alstroemeria, having passives that benefit their team, plays into their style correctly, has some healing associated with it, it's good. If you are playing Dance Alstroemeria, this is a support you definitely want to hang on to. If you're not, don't worry about it. Especially since a lot of teams nowadays focus on lower mental, so healing yourself not exactly on the game plan. Christmas Yuika. Christmas Yuika is another really good generic visual support because of her 100% visual passive if you're below half HP. So if you're building a visual team, this support is going to get a lot of mileage just because of her passive alone. Otherwise, another good SP battery, real good for your visual teams. This is a good recommendation. New Year's Fuyuko. New Year's Fuyuko is a card that is aging kind of okay. She's kind of the weakest of the 3 limited Stray Light supports. But being a vocal support is relevant in today's meta. She has the ability to raise your vocal stat cap every time you work with her in the vocal room, has good passives, and an okay appeal. Pretty strong, not the craziest anymore, but still good. So I would still recommend getting Fuyuko if you're building a vocal team and need something generic to use. Chiyoko. Chiyoko's Maid SSR is fine. Okay passives, okay appeal. Really the biggest thing is that she's not too different from the permanent SSR Chiyoko that you may have copies of, which is Sakura Mochi Master. So if you already have copies of her, this Chiyoko is kind of redundant and doesn't really do a whole lot different. So I wouldn't really recommend it. Avalon Tenka. Probably the most important support for Visual Alstroemeria. If you have the pieces for it or want to start building towards Visual Alstroemeria, Tenka is real good for it. Strong passives, strong healing, great defensively for Alstroemeria, perfect support for that team. And lastly, Uchikuru Mei. Mei is probably one of the easiest picks for a visual team because of how generically easy she is to run on visual teams. Much like the New Year's Fuyuko, all the same positives, all the same benefits, great appeals, great passives, great masteries. Really nothing to dislike about Uchikuru Mei if you are running a visual team, so I would recommend her for sure. Now, that will do it for the video today. If you'd like me to talk about any other cards at some other point, cards that we maybe have missed for the Shiny review, or just talk about cards in general, feel free to let me know in the comments. Otherwise, hopefully this video was helpful for you whenever a limited selection ticket comes around, and you just think, man, do I want one of the older cards? The answer is probably no, but who knows? Maybe you'll find something real interesting to pick from. Till next video, I've been Cho. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day.